Today is the 16th of January 2018, and this is a conversation between Emilio Longo and Martinho Correia. So, hey Martino, how you doing?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
No worries. So, you're currently located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, is that right?
Yes, yes, I spend 6 months here and 6 months in Europe.
Sure, sure. And have you been there your whole life in Calgary?
Pretty, um, it's part of it. I mean, most of it. Was born and grew up here. I did study in Vancouver
Mm-hmm.
for a little over a year, and then I spent a number of years living and studying in Italy. So,
Sure, sure. Okay. So I would like to start really from the beginning. So your early childhood, did you always want to be an artist?
yes, I always had that kind of desire, and was always drawing. Some of my earliest memories are, bringing home drawings from school and sharing with my parents, and kind
Mm-hmm.
of always had that. I still have the stack of drawings even from you know kindergarten and elementary school
Sure.
that I've kept. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, like lots of artists in their childhood, you copied illustrations from comic books, right?
Yes, I wanted to be a comic book artist for the longest time,
Mm-hmm.
and so in high school, me and a couple of friends, we made our own comic books, and the friend of mine that I did it with, he went on to become an architect. I actually didn't really think seriously about becoming an artist because I had intention of going and studying sciences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Having a father that was an immigrant, Portuguese immigrant, it was
Mm-hmm.
very important that we went to university and got you know an important, I guess, position, since he only had grade 4. He was expecting or hoping that I would have become a doctor, but that didn't happen. So and it was a very circuitous path to becoming an artist.
Sure. Okay. So, during your high school years, were you aware of the work of the old masters?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean mostly Michelangelo and
Mm-hmm.
Leonardo. The big three, I guess: Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael.
Sure.
Um, I
And
didn't take. I only took one art class. That was grade 10 because I was really not thinking about going into art further. So really, I was very much into the comic book artists. John
mhm.
Byrne, George Perez, all those guys from the 70s and 80s.
Sure, sure. And in regards to your introduction to those three initial artists, the High Renaissance artists, how were you introduced to them?
Junior high school, I had a really good art teacher, Brenda Klotz. It was her first year teaching, so she was just at university, and she introduced us to those guys in one of the classes.
Fantastic. And did she cover contemporary art as well? Was it mainly, older pre-20th century art?
There was not that much art history that I
Hmm.
remember, anyhow. I do remember her kind of talking about Michelangelo, and that's kind of where my first memory of him comes from, I suppose. Yeah.
Sure. So many kids have a natural inclination to draw. It sounds like you were one of these kids.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, good. Um, so moving on, you attended the University of Calgary and graduated in 1990 with a BFA in painting. However, prior to this, you studied pre-med sciences for a couple of years. Is that right?
Yes, I did 2 years of biology, chemistry, all those fun subjects, and my the margins of my books were really filled with caricatures and drawings of my teachers and students and whatnot, and my heart really wasn't in it. So
Hmm.
I think my mother at one point had seen my notes, and she said, "Have you ever thought about taking an art course just to see?" And I said, "Not really." So she kind of encouraged me, and I did that between, say, my second, would have been my second and third year, and did a drawing course and just fell in love with it, got an A, and just thought, okay, this is really where I need to go. So,
So great. And what were your experiences like training in a university art school?
there's a huge variety of training, right? So there's at that point, this is like the late 80s. I had some really great teachers, particularly John Hall, who's a noted Canadian still life painter.
Hmm.
Um, he was, he's very well known. He's got lots of students, and he paints kind of this high realism in a sense of like photographic realism, a lot of
Yeah.
still life. Um, but it was like really good to really bad. So, it's the whole thing of like paint a still life. So just they put some things up, or
Sure.
paint a self portrait. Not very, very little instruction in technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to figure it out by myself. Um,
Sure.
I remember trying to do a copy of a Caravaggio
Mm-hmm.
head and asking my teacher at the time, how do you mix this particular color? And he said, well, you just kind of gotta figure it out. And obviously he had no idea, right? So it was very frustrating. So I
Sure.
spent a bunch of years after university trying to figure out, how to do these, to paint traditionally, but and realistic, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay. So during university, did you have fellow students that were interested in traditional art as well, or were you kind of on your own?
Yeah, there was two or three of us that were painting um, together, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We all had goatees, and what they called us the goateed realists. So, um, but basically projecting photographs and tracing them and then painting them. So not really much attempt at kind of composition or say interpretive drawing and construct drawing. It was very much a modern or contemporary way of say painting realistically, like the photorealists would have done, right? So,
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
So at this point, were you aware of the kind of aesthetic you were looking for in your work?
um, that's a good question. Not particularly. I knew I wanted to paint traditionally. I knew I wanted to paint like like even back then I was a big fan of Caravaggio,
Sure.
and then I was looking a lot at Eric Fischl,
Mm-hmm.
painter Eric Fischl, and David Sally, all those guys from the '80s that painted realistically, and then Vincent Desiderio appeared.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I think '88, '89. And that was like a whole revelation. This guy was painting, traditionally, but like contemporary subject matter. So, he was a huge inspiration at that point. But still, my paintings were pretty hard edged and somewhat flat.
Mm-hmm.
It was missing kind of the atmosphere that would be necessary to kind of give it a sense of volume, I suppose. And
Sure, sure. And it would be hard. I mean, not having a teacher there to guide you, you're trying to figure this stuff out on your own.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just painting and,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at different artists and,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
basic, pretty much just copying photographs, combining it with kind of like my imagination and just seeing, what happens. So
Mm. Mm. So basically exploring, which every art student should do in their
yeah,
younger
yeah.
years. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. So moving forward, in 1992 in Toronto, you happened to listen to a lecture by Michael John Angel, who is the director of the Angel Academy of Art currently in Florence, Italy, regarding traditional representational painting. That summer, you attended what was then Michael John Angel Studios in Toronto. Now, it seems as though this experience really had an impact on the trajectory of your life.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Meeting John Angel changed my life entirely. I still tell him that. Yeah. Yeah.
So, how did you come? How were you aware of the lecture?
I would just happen to be in Toronto one weekend, visiting family, and there is a this poster of the lecture plastered all over the place. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's somebody that still teaches this stuff. So, I had to go. I had to go to the lecture, and then afterwards, I went and introduced myself and asked if I could come to the studio, and so yeah, that was kind of the beginning of this crazy journey of being an artist.
Sure. And where was that
Yeah.
lecture taking place?
I think at the convention center in Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah, if that memory serves. Yeah,
Sure, sure.
it
So,
was pretty. There was a lot of people. It was very, very well attended.
good, good. So, eventually, you would come to study with Michael again in the Angel Academy of Art in Florence. However, prior to this, in 1993, you returned to university to complete a Bachelor of Education in Art Education at the University of British Columbia. Now, after such an experience with Michael John Angel, what provoked you to become a school teacher?
That's a good question. I had actually had that in my mind because I had spent a couple of years just painting, and I wasn't seeing as much success as I wanted to, and I just wanted to, I suppose, I always had this thing of being educated in the back of my head. So
Mm.
another degree couldn't hurt. And I did like teaching. So I decided I'll go back and get a teaching degree. Because that was actually an idea I had had previous between, say, moving from science to fine arts. I was thinking maybe I would just go right into education
Mm-hmm.
and do art education.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So it was always there. It was always a sense there. And I've got like my sister is a teacher, and I've got an aunt who's a teacher. So
Okay,
I was
so yeah,
always like assisting teaching. So being a teacher is part of who I am, and I love it. So
yeah, sure, sure. Okay, so when you were doing your art education, uh, were your ideas pretty open? I mean, were you kind of biased towards traditional art, or did you find a lot of your colleagues were more of the modernist school?
when I was doing the degree,
Yeah.
um, no, I think everyone was pretty open. I mean, at that point, this is like 1993, right? So there wasn't any training, traditional training available. So,
Sure.
but no, the people weren't opposed to kind of working traditionally or trying to work, traditionally or, um, yeah, I don't remember that at all. I remember I myself was just more into experimenting with materials and stuff. That was the great thing about that is, got access to a whole bunch of processes. So that
Sure.
was my kind of goal, not so much producing a particular look of work, but rather experiencing many different processes of making art.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So, moving on, you taught art for the following 6 years in high school. So, what kind of curriculum did you develop for your students?
Actually, I taught elementary and junior high school, so I taught grade 1 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah, so um, I developed the program that was somewhat based on art history.
Mm-hmm.
It involved some parts were art history based, some parts were technical based. I did a cartooning unit with the grade sevens,
Mm-hmm.
and then we did things like perspective. And then as they went, say, from grade 7 to grade 8, they did more things like we talked about composition and surrealism and how to make a surrealist picture and
Mm-hmm.
composing. So I tried to really do a skills and art history based program.
Great.
Yeah,
Sure.
and it was pretty successful. We had a big art show every year, and um, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So was that did you stay in one particular school or were you moving around?
No, I was in one school. My first year I was in one school, and then after that I moved to another school, and that I was there for 5 years. So I was able to build a really good program.
Great. Sure, sure. Fantastic. Okay, so in 2000, you took a leave of absence from teaching in order to continue training at the Angel Academy. Now, was that a hard decision to make, leaving teaching to go to the Angel Academy?
Not at all. I had planned actually. I did what was called a 3-year deferred leave. So
Mm-hmm.
um, you get paid 2/3 of your salary for 2 years, and then the third year is your year off. So you actually get still that salary
Yeah,
back.
sure.
So that was an easy decision. It was my plan from like 1990 when I first met John was to go to study with him in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
that was always built into the plan. But then, of course, once I got to Italy, I was like, my gosh, this is amazing. This is exactly what I want to do. So
Mm-hmm. Okay.
1 year became 2 years, and then they extended my leave of absence, and then I just resigned and decided this is really what I wanted to be an artist who teaches, not necessarily a teacher does art. So
Sure, sure. Okay. So, focusing on the Angel Academy of Art in Florence for a moment. So, can you tell me a little bit about the philosophy of that school?
um, they're very much skills based. They want to teach you how to make beautiful pictures, right? So first thing is that you need to master the art of seeing,
Mm-hmm.
and because really learning how to draw is learning how to see. So it's a very skills based program that's built. Your skills are built through a series of exercises that become progressively more difficult as you move through the program. And so you master one particular skill, say, for example, creating the illusion of form with pencil on a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move into charcoal, doing that with charcoal. And then you move into doing that by copying a three-dimensional cast in charcoal.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add paint. And so the end goal is to make artists, right? So
Sure.
um, first thing is the acquisition of skills, and then with Maestro John Angel. He teaches the advanced students, and he really brings in a lot of what it is to be an artist, right? How to make a picture,
Mm-hmm.
what is art. So there's that real shift, right? And that's the strength, I think, is that they've got John Angel, the maestro head of studies, and they've got Jared Woznicki, who's the head teacher, and he's very much very, very good at instilling skills in the students.
Sure.
So they're a good kind of 1-2 combination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, can you tell me a little bit about Michael John Angel's history?
Yes, he was born in Manchester, I think 1946, because he's 70 this year, I believe.
Yeah.
And then he immigrated with his family to Canada, Toronto, as a young man, I think 15 or 16.
Mm-hmm.
He went to Italy to study, I believe it was poetry, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm mistaken. And he had a letter of introduction. Somebody in Toronto had known Antigone, so he went to see Antigone and was asked if he could actually stay and study with him. And as Maestro tells the story, Antigone says, "Sure, you can stay with us." And then John Angel said he kind of got a little shy. He said, "Well, what if I make a mistake?" And Antigone reached over and said, "Well, then I will kill you." So if you can hear the story from John himself, it's very good. So John stayed with him for 4 years
Mm-hmm.
in Florence, and then returned to Canada and started to. This is like, I guess, mid 70s, and starting to paint pictures and figure out how he can teach this stuff, how he can codify it into teaching. So he's been doing this for 40 years, trying to figure out how to make painters. So
Sure, sure.
I think, and then at that time he returned to Italy in the late 80s,
Mm-hmm.
88 or so, and it's kind of was back and forth between there and Toronto, and
Yeah,
then finally settled in Italy, I think, in the late 90s. So
sure. Now, is his school in Toronto still running?
no,
Yeah,
it's no longer. He has no longer anything to do with that.
sure. And when you were doing the summer program in Toronto, did you find it to be different or very similar to the curriculum of the Angel Academy in Florence?
Oh, it was a workshop, so it was very similar to the workshops that even I teach now. So it's a copy workshop where we went through all the steps, and
Sure,
yeah, it
yeah.
was. I
Okay,
basically my teaching, what I teach, most of it comes from his teachings, and then whatever I can add from my studies on the side. But the bulk of
sure.
it is definitely Angel Academy.
Okay, good. So, regarding the realist movement in Florence, can you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, is it really happening over there? Did you have a contact? Did you have contact with a lot of artists whilst you were studying there?
Oh yes, well I mean, when I went in 2000, there was the three main schools: the Charles Cecil School, the Florence Academy, and Angel Academy. So, and since then, I think Cecil has pretty much stayed the same as
Mm-hmm.
far as number of students. They're kind of they're maybe around the size of Angel, maybe a bit smaller. But Angel Academy has really grown, and so has Florence Academy. Florence Academy is kind of the juggernaut. I think they did have 2 or 3 campuses. Now they just have one huge building that they bought, and
Sure.
so there's lots of artists. I was lucky to back in those days, I was lucky to make friends with some of the artists at the other schools, and we used to have parties together. And I'm not sure it's so much anymore, but every time I go back, I see some of the old artists that are in town and meet new ones. So it's definitely a huge part of being in Florence, right?
Sure.
And besides that, I think there's like 40 different schools and universities in Florence, so it's definitely student central.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've heard that actually making a living as a full-time artist in Florence isn't really, it's not the city for it. I mean, it's good for training, it's good to get your initial understanding of the craft of painting, drawing, and sculpture. But in regards to making a professional career for yourself, exhibiting and things like that, it's not really the city for it. Is that right?
Yeah, not in the city, as far as like the city itself wouldn't provide you with enough, I think. But what the city does do is say, well, I'm an artist that lives in Florence, was trained in Florence.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of your calling card. So you sell in other places, right? So you sell in the States or Britain or Germany or wherever. So, but then if you can live in Florence, and still be able to absorb that atmosphere and then sell other places, that's something that I think some people do, right? So
Sure.
I've got a good friend of mine who's Italian, from Calabria, who has a studio and a small school in Florence. He's works as an illustrator, so he's working realistically from a different tradition,
Sure.
and he does very well. He sells, all over the world, really, to magazines, Marvel comic book covers, all that kind of stuff. So he
Wow.
does extremely well. His name is Lucio Podillo. So
Okay.
um, yeah, there are ways to make it work.
Okay, great. And just regarding the big three, again, the big three schools in Italy, you'd mentioned the Charles H. Cecil Studios, Angel Academy of Art, and the Florence Academy of Art. How do students actually go about affording their fees in these schools? I mean, they're not exactly cheap.
No, that's a good question. I have no idea. I mean, I always tell students you just got to take the jump and the money will show up. So,
Sure.
first of all, it's still cheaper than schools in America, right? So
Yeah.
that's pretty big.
Hmm.
Um, I guess to get loans, parents help out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really asked too much, about that, but I know that for myself, money always seemed to appear at the right moment. So it's just kind of a matter of leap of faith in a certain sense. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, probably just the traditional ways, like saving up. I know some students have like gone in chunks, so they'll like do a year, then they'll go away and work for a year and save up and come back to another year.
Sure.
So there's a variety of ways, right?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Um, well, let's move on from Florence. So eventually, you resign your teaching position, like you stated, in order to complete your studies in Florence. So at this point, you were sure that this is the path you wanted to choose. You wanted to dedicate yourself to full-time painting.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, after you finished your training in the Angel Academy, you were offered a teaching position there. And now, how did that come about?
Oh, that's a good story, actually. I was coming to the end of my 2 years, and I was deciding, geez, do I stay? If I stay, how am I going to make it work? Do I go back to Canada? Uh, so I kind of just put it out to the universe. I said, okay, like what should I do, right? Like I just kind of said it would be really great to stay here if I could. And
Yeah.
the very next day, um, Maestro came up to me and he said, we're looking to expand the school and we'd like to take you on as a teacher. Would you be interested? And I was like, of course, right? So basically, my prayers had been answered. So um, that made my decision very easy. So I stayed and I was teaching half time and studying half time. So um, the
Great.
school, yeah, the school is very generous with me as far as like flexibility and waiving fees when as far as part of my payment and whatnot. So
Sure.
yeah, it's very good. Yeah.
Fantastic. And that's something you still currently do, right? You still teach workshops in the Angel Academy?
Yes, it's one of the highlights of my year because I get to go back to Italy and buy my little bicycle and zip around and see my old friends and teach and experience the city. So it's yeah, it's always fantastic to be there. So
Sure. And in the time, in the years that you've returned there, have you found the Angel Academy of Art to have changed at all?
well, it's grown a lot since when I was there in 2000. I think there was like 10 students. I think now they're around 60 or 70. So
Wow.
and they're on their third location. So um, they've got a building just outside the center that's designed from the bare bones up to be a really great studio. So they've got two main drawing studios. One of them can divide into two, and then they've got cast and still life rooms, and they've got a bark drawing area.
Yeah.
It's a really great space, beautifully designed and beautifully decorated as well, actually. So you really have a sense of you're surrounded by paintings by the maestro and other artists and prints, and then it's a very relaxing and positive place to be, I think. So
Great. Yeah. Sure. Sure. That sounds
it's
lovely.
it's air conditioned too. It's the only school that's air conditioned
Oh
in
yeah. I
in
get,
Florence, which is like necessary in the summer. It gets up to 40 plus degrees Celsius. So
yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember back in the old studio, we used to in the summer workshops, we just have fans, right? And it would be like just painting and sweating, or just
Sure.
dripping.
No,
So
it definitely is hard to do this sort of work when it's that hot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
it's a big boon to the students.
yeah, yeah, sure. And regarding the three schools in Florence, now I understand back in maybe 10 years ago or maybe less than that, there was a bit of rivalry between the schools. Is that still so?
I think there's probably I never thought there was too much of a rivalry that I felt. Maybe friendly.
Yep.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I don't really have too much to say about that because I never really experienced it. I mean, like I said, I knew students from other schools, and I always got along with them. So
Sure, sure. And
maybe a friendly rivalry, let's say, you know. So
okay, yeah.
yeah.
And do you find that students from all three schools communicate with each other?
I'm not sure anymore,
Hmm.
'cause I'm not there enough. But yeah, I don't know. I can't say.
Sure, that's okay. Okay, so let's move forward into 2010. So you completed a master's in architecture, sacred art, and liturgy in Rome at the European University Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, now I've heard really good things about this program. How did you come to find it?
Um, I guess this is 2009. I had spent the summer in Canada, and had come back, and I was really looking for something to kind of spur me on to, like, I guess another source of inspiration, because I was trying to figure out what really I was going to paint. And um, I found about this master's program. A good friend of mine who's an artist, sculptor, and painter named Donny McManus
Mm-hmm.
um, had discovered it, and he said there's this great program that they just started in Rome, and so it's like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need, right? Because it talked about Catholic and Christian art history and theology and philosophy. So what it did, it was give me the kind of foundation for all the skills that I acquired, right? So
Sure.
yeah, it was, again, one of those things, like just perfect timing, right? So it appeared, and um, I just said, yeah, I'm just going to do it. So we went down Friday mornings. I think we caught the 5:30 a.m.
Wow.
train, and class started at 9. I think we ended up being like 10 minutes late with all the trains, because we had to go to Rome Termini
Mm-hmm.
station, and then from there we had to transfer to another train that took us another half an hour outside the city. So it was a bit of a slog, and it was like pretty tiring at times, but totally worth it. Yeah, an amazing course.
Sure. And from what I understand, this program was developed in response to Cardinal Ratzinger, I guess, who is now Pope, or well, who was Pope Benedict and now is referred to Pope Emeritus.
Yes.
His call for a renewal of the liturgy. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly it. So, his book, The Spirit of a Liturgy, if you haven't read a book on, say, theology, even, that was kind of the first almost like theological book I read, is an excellent book. And it just basically explains what the liturgy should be like. So it's kind of based on that book. So a number of artists and architects, priests, took it upon themselves to create this program to teach artists and architects the history and the grand tradition of the Catholic Church, right? Or even just the Catholic and Christian approach to art or picture making. So
Sure.
that they developed this program, and as far as I know, I'm the only Canadian that's done it. So
Great, great. So the culmination of your master's was your thesis titled The Resurrection in Art and Liturgy and your painting titled Anastasis. Now,
yeah,
can you explain the meaning behind this painting, which is a grand painting of Christ carrying a cross amongst a landscape or a sky, I suppose. Is that how you would describe it?
yeah. Anastasis is the Orthodox name for the resurrection.
Sure.
Also, it was referred to also as the harrowing of hell. And there
Yeah.
are some pictures of that in the Western tradition, where Christ basically breaks down the doors of hell and lifts up the saints and that were in limbo, I guess.
Yeah.
So as I was doing the program, we had to start thinking about what we wanted to do, and I became really interested in Eastern Orthodox theology and icons. So before that time, I had really no interest in icons, but I really developed a great appreciation for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so my idea was to try and figure out how to combine this Eastern Orthodox image with the Western style of painting. So my whole thing was like, how can the East and West reconcile, right? Because they've been split since the 11th century, right? So
Yeah.
my contribution was like, well, how can we do this artistically? How can we bring the East and West together? So my idea was to do this harrowing of hell picture, but paint it in like a say a Baroque or Caravagesque style.
Sure.
And so I developed it over like number of sketches and color studies, and input from my professors as well. So yeah, I came up with this picture. It's somewhat iconic in the sense it's like a single figure.
Yeah.
Of Christ coming down. So he's actually descending. So his robes, if you look at them, they're flowing upward. It shows that he's descending, right?
Sure.
And he's showing the wound on his hand, and he's carrying the cross of redemption. And then at his feet, there's just broken stones and rocks, basically showing that he's just broken down the wall. And then my whole idea was to try and combine contemporary realistic imagery as well. So for example, the background, if you look at the halo, that halo is basically comes right off of a Star Wars poster, right? And
Yeah.
I was looking a lot at comic book artists like Alec Ross and how they painted their drapery, like Superman and stuff. So
Sure.
I think some people have said that they do get a sense of this kind of like superhero Christ coming across.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, and I've seen some of the progress photos on your blog regarding the creation of this painting. How did you go about finding the actual model of Christ?
Oh, the model was a student who had become a friend of mine, Juan Pablo, a Mexican guy, and we spent like I don't know how many hours just like photographing, and finally got the pose, and then I did the drawing where I actually elongated the figure, so I made his proportions heroic. Basically, he's I
Hmm.
think 8 or almost 9 heads high. So
Sure.
yeah, so he was the model, and I just somewhat tweaked the expression to get the expression I wanted, and
Yeah.
yeah, kind of I composed everything more or less in Photoshop, and then do the drawing, transfer that, and painted it.
Fantastic. And what a great way of combining contemporary technology with a traditional craft of picture making.
Yes, well, Photoshop is a great tool, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely use it.
Great. And roughly how many hours do you think went into the creating of Anastasis?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, that and my thesis had to be done. My father had been diagnosed with cancer at the same time I was doing the program, so I was flying back over to Portugal to spend as much time as I could with him.
Hmm.
So he passed away after about 5 months of cancer. So I then had to finish all the thesis and painting. And I think about 6 weeks I did it.
Wow.
And that was teaching full time too. So I was working nights painting it. So it really came together. I don't know how many hours, but
Hmm.
a lot.
A lot of
I never
work.
keep
Yeah.
track of hours. Yeah.
Sure.
And actually, that was the first version, the version that I unveiled for my presentation of my thesis. And then they suggested a few changes. So I made a few changes. Like the cross used to be more of a Latin cross,
Yeah.
or no, cross that's more square, and it wasn't gold. So they suggested making it more like the traditional Catholic cross. So
Sure.
I changed that, and I think repainted the background or something. Yeah.
Great. And congratulations on this painting, Anastasis Martinho. It's really a profound image. Really
Thank you.
strong. It's really stuck with me. I remember I came across it on the Angel Academy of Arts blog probably in 2014. They had made a little announcement that you had finished your thesis and that you had created this painting as part of it. And yeah, just a profound, strong image. So yeah, congratulations.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
that's okay. And regarding your thesis, The Resurrection in Art and Liturgy, I had a look at that. You emailed that to me yesterday, and that is very rich. Incredible. I mean, I didn't get through the whole lot, but the information that is there is so steeped in history. How did you go about your research and collecting all this information?
Just reading different books, and um, yeah, I just we had to be thinking about our thesis the entire time. So um, yeah, just buying books and reading them, making notes and collecting it and trying to get an idea of what I wanted to say. So
Mm-hmm. Sure.
just just time, I guess, and
Yeah, yeah, time, yeah,
yeah.
and a lot of reading and just I suppose trying to put things into your own words as well can sometimes be a challenge.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, uh, who were some of the artists that were actually studying with you in this Masters of Sacred Art at the time?
Okay. Well, the one my friend Donny McManus, who I
Yeah.
told you about, who's an Irish sculptor.
Yeah.
Um, Cody Swanson, who is
Yeah.
American and teaches at the Sacred Art School. He was
Yeah.
a graduate of Florence Academy. He's an amazing. They call him the Young Bernini. He's an
Yeah.
amazing sculptor. And
Incredible. Yeah.
um, um, Jason Arkles, who's
Yeah.
American. Jason has his own studio in Florence as well.
Yep.
Those are kind of the three guys that we used to hang out with. And then there was a number of other Italian artists that whose names I have to look up. I've forgotten, but
Sure.
I remember those guys because we went down together and worked together and
Great.
whatnot. So
And how long was the program in length?
a year, yeah,
1 year. Okay.
1 year,
Great.
yeah,
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So is the program still running today?
I believe it is. Yes, yeah, yeah,
Great. Great. And what an incredible experience you've had from studying in Florence to going to Rome. Just incredible. I mean, you really can't get better than that in regards to connecting with your tradition and knowing your roots. You're pretty much in the two main cities, right?
yes. It was awesome because our field trips would be like, we went to see the Shroud of Turin in Torino.
Wow.
That was our field trip, and then we went to this 11th to 12th century monastery in the mountains close to Torino.
Sure.
And there was like these old churches that were decorated in kind of the old fresco style of like
Wow.
12th century. And then we went to Montreal in Sicily. That was another field trip,
Mm-hmm.
um, and saw that, and was in Sicily. So it was just amazing. Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move forward. So eventually you found your way to Norway to train under Odd Nerdrum. Now that's interesting, going from studying and being immersed with sacred art to studying with Odd Nerdrum. So can you tell me a little bit about this period in your life?
Oh yeah, I actually like to do workshops or study with different artists as much as I can.
Yep.
Just gives me inspiration, gives me different ways of thinking about things. So um, yeah, I'd always wanted to go study with Otter, and a friend of mine had suggested that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent an application and went up. I wasn't up very long, just a couple of weeks actually. I had the intention to go back, but even those 2 weeks were just fantastic. So basically, what I did is I um, copied his paintings as much as I would copy details of his paintings, heads and whatnot, to kind of absorb his style a little bit and his technique. And
Mm-hmm.
then the rest of the time, you would assist him on your paintings. It's great because you get to actually see what a working, successful realist painter does, right? So
Yeah.
he has keeps a very pretty strict but flexible schedule, let's say. So he's in the studio every day at 10, and
Mm-hmm.
he paints, and then you can watch him paint. And then a lot of times you just sit down and you talk philosophy with him. He'll take out books and we'll look at art books, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's a really great experience.
Sure.
Um, I modeled for him as well. He needed a bald head, so I modeled for a
Yeah.
bald head.
I saw that
Uh,
photo. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. So again, another kind of life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So can you tell me a little bit about the area of where the actual Nerdrum school is located? I understand it's located next to the beach. Is that right?
The school, yeah, it's called the. It's like I guess in Portugal it'd be like a villa, but it's called Mamrosa. There's place, so there's like a big studio with student residences on the bottom
Mm-hmm.
and two studios up top. One is the main studio for Odd, and the other one is a studio for students.
Yeah.
And then the family home is there as well. And yeah, they're on a fjord, right? So
Sure.
the water's a ways down. It's just beautiful. It's great place to make art and
Sure. Yeah. Um,
like just live.
Yeah, of course. I've seen a couple of the videos that have been made by, I suppose, Odd Nerdrum and his students, and just some of the scenery around that area is incredible.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
northern Norway is just, well, Norway is just beautiful. That part is the blue skies and the the lush green of it at that time of year. Anyways, yeah, it
Hmm.
was very, very beautiful. Yeah,
When you were there, was it winter or summer?
September,
Okay,
so fall. It was fall. Yeah, it was fall.
fall. And did it? I understand that area of the world sort of gets dark, uh, very early. Was that happening when you were there?
I guess I don't remember too much about
Hmm.
that, but I mean, I live in northern Canada, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
used to it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Okay, so whilst you were there at the Nerdrum School, who were some of the other artists that were in the studio with you?
Oh, um, I can only remember first name. Jonas
Mm,
was a local Norwegian
yeah,
painter. Um, oh, I can't remember the other people's names. I'd have to look them up.
sure, that's fine. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so what is your opinion on the Norwegian realists? I mean, the students that are coming out of the Nerdrum School.
Um, specifically the Nerdrum School, you think? Or
Well, I mean, if you know of other schools that are in Norway that are training realists, that's you can answer
yeah, no,
regarding
I don't
those.
know.
You don't know, yeah.
Well,
So
he's such a strong artistic and not just an artistic personality, but just a personality, right? He's just a
yeah.
very generous and giving and kind person,
Hmm.
and just great to be around. And of course, then his artistic output is so incredible too, right? So,
Hmm.
I think a lot of these young students that go are just totally overwhelmed by it, and that's
Hmm.
good that they absorb, his style. So I think we're still seeing the development of that school because a lot of them just really paint too much like him or exactly his kind of style. I guess almost like
Yeah,
the Kedevajisti would just take Kedevajo style and paint.
sure, sure.
So just curious in say another generation to see what will come of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a
So,
lot of great painters, like a lot of great painters that have gone and study with him and
hmm,
absorb it. Like Teresa Oaxaca was up there, and I
yeah,
think she absorbed a bit. And Nick Alm is also
yeah,
one of my favorite current painters. Just he talks about being really influenced by Odd Nerdrum. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so I'd look more at those people that were trained and then went and studied with him, rather because he doesn't do that. I don't think he doesn't train students the same way they do in the academies.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Uh,
good to have some skills and then go and kind of absorb what he has to
sure.
offer rather.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting just considering Odd Nerdrum for a minute. He has created his own lineage of realist art, which he, I believe, refers to as kitsch.
Yes.
And we don't really hear much about his school or him as an artist. And why do you think this is the case?
I think, well, I mean, that's a good question. We're us kind of contemporary realists are kind of apart from the mainstream art
Yeah,
movement, right? So,
sure.
um, there's a lot of money and investment in that kind of modern, postmodern uh, thing that they've got going on. So,
Hmm.
um, we're not going to get the same recognition just because of that, right? So,
Right.
and we're still young. I guess we're kind of the new avant-garde, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, people that see the work, I think a lot of them, particularly by Odd Nerdrum's work, they find it uneasy, right? But
Right.
I see his work as like the psychological portrait of our time, right? We're living in very dark times,
That's right.
and I just think that he represents that
Yeah.
so accurately, and his paintings are just beautiful to see in person. They're like old Italian frescoes. They're like thick and like their
Mm,
paint's appealing in some places, and they're just
sure.
real. Like they're really yummy, I guess is the word. Like they're just like so much to them. So yeah, I think and who knows what long range what will happen, but
Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting aesthetic that Odd Nerdrum has because it is kind of this Rembrandt technique with this kind of odd, sort of surreal, sort of otherworldly subject matter, that monsters
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right in saying that. So many of the students who have trained with him, I mean, the ones that have come out of the Nerdrum school who haven't had prior training, the work is pretty much taking on that same aesthetic.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, now I understand Odd Nerdrum was in a bit of trouble, I suppose, with the government. I'm not too sure on the whole story, but do you know what the current situation is with Odd?
Yes, he got pardoned by the King of Norway, so he's not going to jail. That's
Oh,
great.
great, fantastic,
Yeah. Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Okay, sorry,
which means
go on.
hopefully I can go up and study with him again.
Yeah, sure. Because from what I understand, he was in trouble. Was it tax invasion?
Well, yeah, tax evasion. They said had gone through all these courts. He had put something like he put some money aside to reimburse some art paintings that had problems, and he
Yeah,
didn't claim it. I'm not sure exactly the details. I'm sure that somewhere online you could find out. But
sure,
uh,
sure. Yeah, because apparently people were saying that his paintings aren't archival. They were deteriorating over time.
yes, that's what happened with this experimental medium he was using at the time. Is that it started to separate, I think, from the canvas. So he
Sure.
offered to rebuy the paintings or repaint them, right? So
Hmm.
um, yeah, again, I don't know too much what the medium was, but that was something that was happening. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Um, well, let's move on. So you mentioned that you like to take workshops whenever you can with other artists to learn of their techniques. Eventually, you found your way to Dublin to take a workshop with David Casson.
Yes.
What is the most important thing that you took from your workshop with David?
Oh, that's a good question. I really liked the range of colors that he had on his palette,
Sure.
and so it gave a really rich flesh flesh color to the paint.
Yeah.
Um, then also his paint application is totally different than what
Mm.
I am used to. He builds up in like small, almost like small strokes, right? And
Hmm.
builds this kind of like layer after layer of painting. So he's very sharp. Like the painting's very sharp and in focus,
Sure.
almost like
Yeah.
a little bit hyper realistic, I guess,
Yes. Yes.
which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I have to say the palette
Hmm.
was the and the process too was it's similar to what I do, but like the process is a little different. We did a drawing in black,
Hmm.
sorry, on gray paper with white and black, and then transferred that and painted that. So it's just different approaches to and seeing what I like and what I don't like. So
Yeah. Sure, and that's so accurate what you're saying about David Casson's work. I mean, it's great, but it is so almost hyper real. I mean, when you're painting, he's actually painting the wrinkles on the skin of his subject,
yeah,
the
yeah,
actual bloodshot, vessels in the face and things like that. That is really taking it to another level.
yeah.
Can you explain exactly what he uses his binoculars for? I've seen him working. He uses binoculars
Oh
whilst
yeah,
he's working from
that's
the model.
yeah. I'll use them too when I'm working for the model. That's just when you're from a distance. If you want to see the shape of the corner of the eye, you
Yeah.
can just focus, just look with your binoculars, and it'll zoom right into like that shape of the nostril, or say the shape of the eye, or what exactly is happening on the surface, right? Because from a distance you can't see it as well.
Sure, sure. Okay, well that's really interesting. I mean, I don't see too many artists using binoculars for that purpose. Um, okay, well let's move on to the Sacred Arts Guild of Alberta. So now I understand that you're involved with this guild. Now, what is the guild's mission, and how are you involved?
I'm I'm not too much directly involved just because I'm not here a lot of the time.
Yeah,
But I know they just want to. Their main mission is to promote sacred art within Alberta through workshops, but also um, just the, let's say, the awareness, making people aware that it exists.
yeah,
I gave a lecture at the kind of an inauguration of it last spring, I guess it was. Yeah.
sure.
Um, and so they're having ongoing workshops, and and meetings, but I'm not really too much involved because I'm away so much.
Yeah,
When I'm here, I'll try and meet up with people and whatnot, but I don't really have too much to do with it.
sure. Okay, fair enough. So in regards to other kind of organizations, I mean, have you found other organizations around the world that are promoting sacred art?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone, and
Mm.
no.
Hmm. Okay, that's okay. Moving on to my next question, regarding beauty. Now, there are different types of beauty. There's conservative beauty. We have modern beauty that would, consider something that is grotesque to be beautiful. How would you define sacred beauty?
Sacred beauty, I think, is I think all beauty actually has to be tied to the good and the true. So you need those three things together
Hmm.
to they're kind of linked, right? So a lot of time beauty is let's say dislinked or cut away from what is good and what is true. So beauty can be used to show things that are not good or not true, right?
Hmm.
So as an example would be the use of the human body in pornography, right?
Sure,
Versus a painting, a beautiful painting by a master of a nude body. Two totally different
of
things, but still
course.
this they're still beautiful things, but one is kind of has one vision and one has another vision. So sacred beauty, it'd have to do with really the beauty would have to be a reflection of God. So it
Yeah,
would have to be true, good, and beautiful, right? Which is what God is.
yeah, yeah, of course. So what we're dealing with I guess with beauty on its own is something that's kind of a secular beauty, but when we're talking about sacred beauty, we're talking more about a religious Catholic Judeo-Christian um, perspective. Is that, am I along the right lines
Yeah,
there?
I think so. Yeah,
Sure. Okay.
yeah.
Um, now, you mentioned a few sacred artists that you've had contact with. I know a few myself, but yeah. So have you had a lot of contact with other sacred artists that are working today?
Yeah, Anthony Visco, I kind of keep in touch with. He's in Philadelphia.
Okay.
David Clayton, who's started an online university
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, that I'm supposed to be teaching a course on Caravaggio on Pontifex. It's called Pontifex University,
Yeah.
and
So
they've actually
sorry,
sorry.
Martinho. He had an interesting proposal I found online, actually, proposing a sacred art school. So has that actually gone on ahead now? Has it?
Yes, it's all online. They're offering a master's in sacred art.
Wow.
He's also written a very good book called The Way of Beauty,
That's right. Yeah.
which I highly recommend. And he's also done a series, I think you still find online, on beauty and through kind of art history and beauty together. It's online, little episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent series. So he's been very busy and doing very good things
Is that
in that regard.
sorry, Martinho? Is that series available free online, or is it you have to
Yes, I think
subscribe?
it's called. No, it's free. I think it's called The Way of Beauty.
The Way of Beauty. Okay, fantastic.
Take a look and see if you can find it. But yeah, he did that when he was instructor at a college, St. Thomas More College, I believe it was, on the east coast of the United States.
Yeah,
And now he's living in California and doing this Pontifex. So
sure. Okay. So Anthony Visco, David Clayton, anyone else?
um, Matt Collins is a friend of mine. He was a
Yes.
teacher at he still does teach at Cecil Studios, and he does some beautiful stuff as well. He's
Yeah.
working very traditionally, a slightly different tradition than I am, maybe more 18th century, I suppose,
That's
19th.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and, yeah, he does a lot of, he's Catholic and he does a lot of sacred art or religious art, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. And regarding just on talking about Matthew Collins for a minute, one thing that popped into my head was in your experiences in Italy, in Rome, Florence, and such, have you ever come across pure sanguine for sanguine drawing?
I haven't, but Matt Collins makes it, so
That's right, he does, yeah. Because
yeah.
from what I,
He
sorry,
gives the recipe. He gives the recipe too on his website. So
that's right, yeah, because
if
I,
anyone's
I
interested,
was under the impression that the actual hematite that is used for the sanguine has actually become obsolete in Italy. I'm not sure if that's true.
haven't heard that. So
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so regarding my questions about your biography, I've pretty much reached the end of those. Is there anything else you wanted to add that you think is of importance to your biography?
no, that my painting, the Anastasis, is in the collection of Cardinal Piacenza in the Vatican.
That's
So I do
right.
have that piece in there,
I've seen
which
it.
is I'm very proud of that happened.
Yeah.
Um, I guess it's the only thing. And my next workshop is going to be with Adrian Gottlieb in Los Angeles. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, of course. Now, I did see a photo of your painting Anastasis in situ in that church. It looks fantastic. I mean, once it's actually placed in
Oh,
there, just, yeah, really, really incredible.
that's actually that's not in situ. That's a Photoshop version of what it was supposed to be in situ.
Oh, is that right?
The painting itself is actually in the office of the cardinal.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah. I was looking for a church to put it in, and I kind of just did that. That was the church I proposed
Hmm.
to have it in, and I just photoshopped it behind the into the space behind the altar. But the actual painting now is in Vatican. Yeah.
Okay, sure. That's great. So I want to move on to a few questions regarding realist and sacred art today. Now, one of the articles that I was reading of yours, I believe it was The Heart of a Catholic Artist. Uh, it was regarding the state of representational art today. You stated, quote, I believe the lack of widespread promotion in the art form is part of a larger ideological battle that promotes a very specific anti-Western and more specifically anti-Christian worldview, unquote. Can you elaborate a little bit on this statement?
Um, sure. Yeah, I guess it references mostly a lot of like what happened with the figurative tradition in the 20th century, particularly towards the end of the 20th century, and how, and even today, I suppose, a lot of the art becomes um, about deconstructing the figure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Taking it apart or making it ugly. I'm thinking particularly of paintings of Bacon
Mm-hmm.
or Basquiat,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people really love their work, but I find it any painting I find it rather offensive,
Yeah,
just because of what it does do to the figure. Um,
sure.
I mean, it has other qualities as far as it's painterly and it's colorful and the mark making is great, but um, yeah. So I just personally, when a figure is taken apart, the integrity is lost. I just don't find it attractive at all, right? So
Sure.
I'd rather piece be abstract, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, and figurative painting always does include some abstracting of the figure, but when it's pushed so far that it becomes distorted to the point of being ugly, right?
Yeah, sure.
Um,
And
I don't like, but so I guess yeah, I guess I mean we've cut the contemporary world's kind of cut itself off from the its roots, right?
yeah,
Its Christian roots. The West is Greco-Roman Roman Christian, right? So
mm-hmm.
we've kind of cut that off, and we're in decline because we've lost our roots, right? We're not we haven't accepted them, or we've forgotten them, or not interested in them, or whatever the reasons are. But
Sure, sure.
and
Okay.
that yeah.
So I've got another quote here, I think from the same article. And this one states, it comes down to faith and money. While we live in a time of great wealth and prosperity, our faith has dwindled. Our advanced culture is unable to match anything done in the Renaissance and Baroque. What do you think we are missing?
Well, like I said, I think it's faith, right? Just
Faith.
I remember being in Sicily and being in a church. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but this church had been bombed by the Allies, so the roof had been replaced, and the roof was kind of this like their 20th century Disney-esque version with bright colors
Sure.
and whatnot. Didn't match the rest of the church. The rest of the church was like floor to ceiling relief sculpture of putti and angels flying
Mm.
all untangled and like just incredibly beautiful
Mm-hmm.
and done like 400 years ago. Like, and it wasn't cheap, but they did it.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so I just I think really it just comes down to faith, is that people give a little bit. I mean, there's so many different things, right? It's not just faith, but it's also like education of what is possible and what churches should be rather than what they are. And I
Hmm.
think there's many different levels that you can attack that at. But I think the main thing would have to be faith. And
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's just interesting that in our sort of contemporary era, we have technology on our side, yet we look back, five, 600, even further back years ago. We today can't really match what, these early artists and architects created during that time. I just find that fascinating. I mean, what is it that they had that we don't? And what you're saying there, I think, is just regarding education, the faith really penetrating the tradition and culture of that time. It's just incredible. I mean, how did they actually create what they created? When you think about it, really
yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
well, I
Okay.
mean, as far as the big churches and things like that, that would be faith. But I mean, just the making itself was much more craft based, right? And
Mm,
it was just a tradition that was passed down and kept alive, and it was living and growing. Where we've lost that, right? So
yeah.
you lost that with the advent of, say, the 19th, 20th century art school, right? It's
Sure.
become
Sure.
more about teaching kind of more maybe an ideology than art to go along with that, rather than continuing a tradition or a craft, right?
That's right. Yeah, and I find a lot of contemporary art as well. It's more about making a statement. I'm not sure. Do you see that as well? I mean,
Oh yeah, everything's got to be like have some written piece about it and what it means and what it's
mm,
saying. It's got
yeah,
to be, about an issue, or it's like, I just want the painting to be about the painting.
that's right. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
about beauty, about making something beautiful, because we need more beautiful things in this world. So
That's right. Yeah. So I've heard you say as a kind of answer to this that you hope to kind of culminate a new renaissance of artists that are working in the grand Catholic traditions, learning about painting and philosophy and theology. Do you think this is actually happening now?
I think there's some artists that are doing that, but on a wider scale, even not without, say, the Catholic tag on it, there is a really great renaissance of art that's happening. Even coming out of, say, the Greco-Roman tradition.
Yeah.
Working, someone like Shane Wolfe, who does these
Mm,
really great big figurative paintings, and um, so not necessarily just a Christian vision, but maybe a more humanist, Greco-Roman vision that's interesting as well. So
that's an
um,
interest. Sorry, Martino, that's an interesting distinction you've just drawn there. So you're saying you've got Greco-Roman, so you're saying Shane Wolfe, what he's creating is kind of in that tradition, and then you're saying Roman Catholic as another kind of tradition. Now, can you, if you can, if it's not too hard, describe the differences between the two traditions?
well, I think there's overlap, right? I mean, the Michelangelo absorbed all the lessons of the Greeks and Romans. There's
Hmm.
definitely overlap, but I think just the addition of the concept of God, the concept of a God in, say, a Catholic culture versus the concept of God in, say, a Greek or Roman culture was very different,
Yeah,
right? So their gods are more like flawed humans,
sure,
whereas the Catholic God is existence, is being itself, right? So very very different concepts are going to produce different art forms, but
hmm,
there's still a lot of beautiful things and truth, I guess, really truth in those works. And a lot of these artists saw that and took what they can and made it Catholic, I guess. And that's very much a Catholic tradition, is that anything that's seen as being true or good often gets adopted or used by the Catholic culture to make its point.
sure, sure, yeah. So I think in regards to the realist movement today, I mean, we can see a lot of paintings which are realist, perhaps secular sort of realism, not necessarily you know without a kind of Catholic tag on it, which are basically talking about truth and beauty, but yeah, are secular, aren't really talking about like the grand Catholic traditions or anything like that, and that's still beautiful in and of itself.
Oh yeah, there's tons of beautiful paintings, like, and great artists. Like I said, Nick Alm is one of my favorites
Yeah.
right now, and Teresa Saka is doing some great stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
Adrian Gottlieb. So many good artists.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And I think, from what I can see from my perspective as well, it isn't that the Catholic tradition of realist art isn't quite as big as this kind of secular movement in realist art. Would you agree?
No, definitely not, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, these paintings are expensive and they take a long time to make, so it's hard to find people that want to spend, that much money to
sure.
do something like that, right? So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, definitely.
um, but it's a lot of these things that we're talking about are happening, right? As far as like just making beautiful pictures. One thing I do find though is there's a little bit too much at times of a shift more towards like hyper realism. This
That's
is like
right.
this extreme definition of what's happening.
Yes.
There's like I see that happening more and more.
Yeah.
Even in my own work, it sometimes it sneaks in because you
Hmm.
get so focused on trying to copy reality rather than say interpreting it, right? So
Sure.
it's kind of trying to create what maybe a heightened reality or more real than real, I suppose. And how do you do that, right? That's the next thing to figure out, right? Rather than just copying what you see, that's easy. How are you
Sure.
going to make it now, you know, beyond real or like meta, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you there. I think we are at a point now where we're pushing realism to a point where it's just become, um, more than just what we're seeing, or more than what is merely just depicted in front of us, but it's, yeah, taken on to a point where it's like this hyper realism, and that's interesting because from what I understand, 19th century technique is all about conceptualizing a light source. So in a sense, that is a kind of form of hyperrealism, but um, not necessarily to the point where, like as I was saying of David Casson, like painting the wrinkles, each individual wrinkle on the skin and things like that, is just taken to a point where perhaps it's too much. I mean, it's great, I really love it, but it's different. It's a different tradition, I think.
Yes, it's a different tradition, totally, right? It's kind of a photorealist tradition, a bit.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So regarding this topic that we've been discussing, is there anything else you'd like to add before I move on to my next question?
I don't think so. Nothing popped into my head.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. So I'll move on. Now, you teach a number of workshops around the world focusing on the painting methods used by artists such as Bouguereau and Caravaggio, and specifically Caravaggio's late technique. Now, what curriculum do you follow in your workshops? Now, I think you touched on this briefly before, that you sort of have taken what Michael John Angel gave you and added your own sort of theory to that.
Yeah, so I try to gear the workshops to be even for beginners. So um, start right at the beginning. We don't worry too much about drawing in these workshops because
Hmm.
lots of drawing is extremely difficult, always is,
Yeah,
and takes a long time. So we work from a print and we just transfer that print right onto the canvas. So we have the drawing, on the canvas by the end of the first day,
sure.
and and then I can focus just on showing the students, step by step what the process is, and then they just practice it. So I'll do a demo, and then they'll get to work on it. So the vast majority of time is them painting, and I'm just kind of wandering around, keeping an eye on everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Doesn't
So
not doesn't sound too exciting, but yeah, it's just yeah, students working for the most part.
sure, and that's a really good strategy that you take there, where you're actually just transferring the drawing almost to the canvas. Because I mean, if you were to focus on drawing, I mean, on getting the drawing onto the canvas, that would be a separate workshop in and of itself, right?
Oh yeah,
You'd be
yeah.
there for a
It's
while.
a whole other skill, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's different ways you can do that. You can grid it. I've done that where they grid it and transfer it.
Hmm.
But in the end, I just have them. I just get a photocopy of the picture and have them put some charcoal on the back and trace out the light and shadow pattern.
Yeah.
And that's also a good learning stage too, because they can see how the painting is designed in terms of light and darks. And then we go in and block those in with the umber paints and build up in layers from there.
Sure. Okay. So regarding Caravaggio's painting technique and Bouguereau's painting technique, how did you develop your understanding of their working methods? I mean, was it through books or talking with other artists, visiting museums?
Some books, some of it looking at unfinished work.
Yeah.
Uh, some of it's from what John Angel has found out. There's also another book by Joseph Shepard who talks about different processes
Mm.
of painters.
What's
So
the
kind of all
title?
those.
Sorry, Martinho. The
Um,
title of Joseph Shepard's book, was that the Technique of the
trying
Old
to
Masters? I think something along the lines of that.
something like that. I have it here on my shelf somewhere. I'm trying to see if I can find it, but
Yeah, I've
I
come
yeah.
across it.
Oh, how to paint like the old
Yes, that's the
masters.
one. Yeah,
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 yeah.
sure.
So that's another one. And then just looking at their unfinished paintings, that's a huge thing, right? So
Yes.
there's a lot of unfinished Bouguereau. You can kind of see he works pretty much, not exclusively, but almost always in a mid-tone gray
Mm-hmm.
field color or campitura, and
Yep.
then does a wash drawing on top of that, and then blocks in big colors quite loosely, and then overpaints a bit smoother. So you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see the different stages. So from those, you can kind of understand, how he works, right? But the thing with Bouguereau, it's like people are like, well, this isn't. It's not looking like the Bouguereau. Well, it's like it's about putting the right color at the right, you know, place at the right brush stroke. Like there's just so much involved, right? So you can copy the colors and you can put it down,
Mm-hmm.
but your hand's not Bouguereau's hand, right?
That's
So
right.
um, there's not really any secret. The secret is like tons of time working, painting,
Yeah.
studying, right? So in a 2 week workshop, I can show the process and introduce them to the palette, and you get good results, particularly in the Caravaggio workshop. I'm very happy usually with the results in that. The paintings always seem to come out very nice, and students are usually happy too. So
Sure, and I've seen some of your demonstrations. I think you have a few on YouTube, and you can really see the process there from the dead coloring through to glazing. It's yeah, really, really. It seems pretty comprehensive what you're teaching.
yeah, I try to touch on every aspect that they could deal with. So and then there's always questions. So and if we can, we visit museums, which is easier in Italy, and look at the actual paintings in situ or in the museum to see what they look like close up. And
Sure. Okay, fantastic. So, Marcino, can you explain a little bit the difference between Caravaggio's early technique and his late technique? Because I understand you've got a pretty good understanding of his late technique.
well, the late technique, just there's a few articles online, and then through Joseph Shepard's work and also book rather. And then if you look at some of the later pictures, you can actually see the underpainting. So it's a pretty as his career advances, he's on the run, so he's
Hmm.
working probably much quicker, much looser, much simpler. So the early technique seems to be a more traditional, like kind of a mid-tone or even a lighter tone brown,
Hmm.
and then just working in layers. Whereas um, as he gets older, his brushwork becomes looser, his background becomes darker, and you can actually see in some paintings just the simple white underpainting. Right, it's just this. The lights are just really white. That's modeled by pulling it thinner over this dark ground.
Sure.
Um, and so that based on that, and I just thought, okay, well, the simplest thing to do is just to do this kind of darkish mid-tone and modeling in reverse almost. So how you have a white and that's pulled thinner to show that it's getting darker, right? So
Sure.
that seemed to be the way that his late pictures are, right? It's a fun technique too
Hmm.
because that white underpainting gives a nice base for the overpainting of the lighter colors, so that almost like a stained glass window, that light kind of can come sometimes be a nice bright base for these lighter, brighter colors on top. So it
Sure.
seems to work well and gives a nice look to the painting.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And roughly, I mean, are you aware of how many layers went into one of Caravaggio's paintings?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I have a book right in front of me, Caravaggio's painting technique, but it'd be two or three anyways, right?
Mm.
So there'd be the drawing stage, then overpainting. So two or three most likely. Yeah.
Sure. And Caravaggio's followers, you've mentioned the Caravaggessi a few times. So how did they sort of develop that little, I suppose, school? I mean, were they just watching him work? Was he teaching during his time? Do you know much about that?
I don't know much about it. I think it was just naturally that, he was on the run. I think
Hmm.
the first Kitavijisti appeared in Naples, where he went after he was wanted for murder. So he was in Naples, and then he couldn't. Most likely, he was the most famous and popular painter, so he probably couldn't keep up with his commissions. So naturally, other artists just adopted his style. Um,
Sure.
if you can't have a Caravaggio, you can have the next best thing, right? So,
Hmm.
and just out of that, and then that whole school developed kind of naturally from that, and went to Orazio Gentileschi and Artemisia, and then that goes into like Rembrandt and Rubens and whatnot. So, um, yeah, I guess it was such a huge, powerful artistic personality. Someone like even like talking about Otto Nurgen, same thing. It's like such a strong artistic personality that and sort of such a new vision or way of seeing things. It was just natural for people to adopt it.
Sure. Yeah. From what I understand, there was an exhibition of the Caravaggiosi's work. I believe it was either last year or the year before. Did you come across that?
No, I didn't. I know there was a Caravaggio show in Milan this fall. I didn't make it, but
Oh, okay. Okay, that's
I've been
fine.
lucky enough to see a couple of shows of his work. So,
Yeah, I mean, seeing the work in person must really help your understanding of the actual layering and the process that he took.
yes and no. Most of the paintings they're in really good condition, so it's hard to see process, right? It's more
Sure.
um, so the ones that I haven't seen that I've seen in books are the ones that have kind of told me more actually about what's happening.
Of
Usually the
course,
ones
yeah.
in situ you're just so awed by how beautiful they are.
Yeah,
You just want to take them in. Yeah.
sure. Okay. Well, I want to move on into 2016. So you taught a portrait class in Portugal the same time as Glenn Vilppu was teaching. So you met Glenn Vilppu, who's a highly accomplished draftsman, a drawing preacher, really really incredible, specifically with constructive drawing. What was it like meeting him?
Oh, it was great. I'd known of his work back in about 2008, 2009, and had been following him and um, noticed that he was going to be in Italy. So I sent him an email, and his wife invited. They were in Venice, so his wife invited myself and my girlfriend at the time up to
Wow.
to meet him. So we went up and spent the day. We hit it off. Just all four of us just had a great time. So he said, let's do workshops in Florence. So that was the next year, 2000. It was 2010 or 11. Must have been 2010. They came in. I arranged a workshop for them in Florence for that
Sure.
year, and then the next year, and then after that, I was spending my time in the fall in Portugal. So I invited them out to do a workshop at my studio in Portugal, which he did 2 years in a row. This past year, I wasn't in Portugal when he was there, so he did one in the city at my friend Daniel Gamelis is a Portuguese realist sculptor and has a school there of realist painting and drawing and sculpture. So he did
Sure.
it at their school. It's called ARP, the Academy
Arp.
of Realist Art, the Academy
Okay.
of Realist Art in Porto. Yeah.
Fantastic. So from what I understand about Glenn Vilppu, I mean, he's teaching anatomy students. Is that right? He's teaching them constructive drawing. Um, not anatomy students. Animation students is what I meant to say.
Animation, yeah, and
Yeah.
animation students, and a lot of I think actually that's skill, the idea to take looking at something and not copying it but interpreting it through the
Hmm.
construct method is what's
Sure.
missing in our movement. So I'm trying to kind of bring that in. So I've done a number of workshops with him. I've studied online with him as well. So I'm trying to bring more of that aspect of not just a copying nature but actually interpreting it a bit more.
Hmm.
So somehow bringing that and then combining it with this traditional painting method, right? That's kind of my next goal, I guess. But yeah, he teaches a lot of animation
Hmm.
for sure. Um, and he does workshops too all over the world. So
Yeah,
not just animations, but all sorts of artists. But
that's right. And his actual there's a few videos of his going on YouTube, and you just see his actual process. I mean, he works on that giant drawing pad just with a piece of Conte, and some of his drawings that he creates, just constructive drawings from his imagination, is incredible. His understanding of anatomy, of
oh
proportion,
yeah,
things like that, just incredible. And it's interesting what you're talking about, like constructive drawing, particularly. I think when we're talking about 19th century drawing, we're talking about bar drawing, we're talking about drawing from a very linear perspective. But in the 15th century, Renaissance draftsmen, the way that they drew was very loose. It was very constructive. It was from their mind. It was almost
Yeah.
like yeah, it was almost like a comic book artist, comic book, dynamic anatomy.
No, I agree. I mean, I see a lot of that tradition, the great figurative tradition, is kind of split up, right? So but I see some of the best comic book artists or most interesting comic book artists is kind of continuing that tradition of that kind of figures from your memory, and they're very dynamic, and um, they're realistic but not real, So
Hmm.
um, definitely that actually contemporary illustration has a lot of what we're missing in the contemporary realist art world.
Sure, sure. And that's just touching on the comic book, comic book art and such. I mean, you've probably experienced this as well with teaching with a lot of young teenagers and such. When they're talking about drawing, they tend to be interested in, drawing like the Marvel way, drawing superheroes and things like that. And it's great because eventually, once their aesthetic sensibility develops, that appreciation of comic book dynamic art can lead to looking at figures of Caravaggio and things like that. Because as we're talking, I mean, Caravaggio's work is very, very dynamic. It is very much like a comic book artist would draw. So it's great that at a young age that they're able to get this kind of exposure to comic book art, and as they develop in their life, I mean, that could lead to an appreciation of traditional art. Have you found that?
I think it comes down to education again, right? Is that they just need that link
Sure.
between that comic book art and contemporary art. So
Hmm.
um, it can happen, but I don't think it happens as easily as we might hope.
That's right. Yeah.
So
And of course, it has to be in the student to really want that, right?
yes, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. So speaking of your blog, I've mentioned your blog a few times. You have an incredibly resourceful blog titled "Off the Coast of Utopia." Looking at it recently, I found a recipe for tempera putrido. Now, can you explain exactly what this painting medium was used for during the 15th century?
Oh, that's a mixture of white paint that's like with egg and oil. So it's an egg and oil emulsion.
Sure.
And what we use it for actually is to fix mistakes that
Hmm.
would have been let's say you have to paint something you painted something that's quite dark, and then it's a mistake, you have to overpaint it but with a lighter color. Because the lighter colors fade over time, you don't want to put a light over a dark. So this tempera putrido was a fast drying oil egg emulsion that you could use almost like whiteout,
Hmm.
that would still be okay as far as like in the layers of paint wasn't going to be, it's not like acrylic where it's going to cause problems. It would just naturally fit in the layers of paint. You could make the correction with this putrido and
Hmm.
then just overpaint what you had to overpaint. So it was very useful for that.
Sure. And do you know who actually developed the medium? Which artist that was?
Well, I think the tempura putrido recipe I have there is Anagoni's that was given to me from by John Angel.
Sure.
So, and I mean, there's obviously that putrido goes back, uh, to even pre or early Renaissance.
Hmm.
It might even be in one of the early workbook manuals. The name just left my head, but I think it's a fairly. It's an old medium, right? So you
Yeah.
had first egg, tempera, and then you had oil, development of oil, and then I guess someone just experimented to put the two together. So
Sure. And the reason that it's called putrid, from my understanding, is because of the smell it makes when it goes bad.
yeah, putrido is like smells bad,
Smells
right?
bad, yeah.
Putrid, right?
Putrid,
Yeah,
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You have to keep it. You have to keep it in the fridge.
Yeah, that's right. It's not really a summer medium, I found.
No, no.
No. Okay. Um, Now, I want to move on to Pietro Annagoni, who we've mentioned a few times. Now, of course, he is your maestro's maestro, Michael John Angel's teacher.
Yes.
You seem to have a deep respect for Annagoni. How has he inspired you throughout your life?
Um, that's a good question. he's only inspired me because he's inspired because he was John Angel's maestro, really. Yeah, I do have a slight connection to him in the sense that my first week in Florence, just through a weird set of circumstances, I met his wife and was invited to her home and his to look at his library and spend some time in his library. So that was a huge thing, especially when I just been in Italy like a week.
Wow.
And the thing is, she said, "Oh, you can come back anytime you like." Her name is Rosella, and I never did. And I was kicking myself for that was like almost 20 years ago now. But no, Antigone really just I discovered Antigone through the work of John Angel, and you can see um, Anagone's influence on John Angel and John Angel's influence on his students, including myself, right?
Sure.
So, um, again, he was just another really strong artistic personality, that just a strong character and great painter, and um, yeah, someone that I guess deserves recognition.
Yeah,
His middle period, his different artists have different periods. So his middle period is portraits. So his portraits are as good as any portrait ever painted.
that's right. Yeah.
So,
But it is interesting looking at his his oeuvre, I suppose. He definitely did go through periods. I mean, at times he's more tight, at times he was more loose. I mean, some of his drawings are probably some of the best drawings I've ever seen. Uh, but yeah, he did go through periods throughout his life.
and his etchings, actually, I came across an etching of an Antigone this summer in Arezzo and bought it. So his etchings are beautiful,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. And regarding his medium, he developed a very specific medium, which he referred to as tempera grassa, which is a fatty. Grassa means fat, so meaning like a fatty
Yeah.
painting medium. We have lean mediums, we have fat mediums. What do you know of the medium? Is there anyone in Italy that you came across that's actually working with this medium?
I think Silvestro Pistolese is one of his students,
Mm-hmm.
is still working with that medium, and I know that John Angel worked with that for a number of years.
Yeah,
Um, there is, I think, on my blog there is an old BBC
that's right.
short that talks about him making it up as well. So it's mixed with a bit of wine and whatnot. So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, there are artists, but I think it's mostly yeah, Silvestro is one for sure that I know. But other than that, I don't really know.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the actual process of working with this medium is very microscopic, very laborious. Have you found that?
I've never worked with it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
don't know.
sure. And you can find the recipe for tempura grassa in Pietro Anagone's autobiography as told to Robert Wraith. It's called Pietro Anagone, An Artist's Life. Just for
Oh, okay.
listeners. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, I wanted just to talk about constructive drawing a little bit more. So some artists say that learning schemas such as those developed by Andrew Loomis can get in the way of seeing. Now, what's your opinion on that?
Well, it's a balance, right? So
Sure.
they can I'm sure they can get in the way of seeing, but I think they should complement each other, right? So
Yeah.
it can also actually make your seeing more clear because you can actually understand the structure of what's happening because rather than the surface, right? So I think if you can understand, three-dimensionally what's happening there
Hmm.
and take that, then you can actually understand exactly what's going on rather than just kind of blindly copying exactly what's in front of you, which can sometimes be difficult because models move and whatnot, right? So,
Sure.
um, if we can kind of get these two skills being taught at the same time, um, I guess that would be ideal.
Hmm. Okay,
I'm not sure
so
how
uh,
to make that work, but
I think perhaps another way of explaining it is it's good to have the constructive understanding in the back of your mind whilst you're trying to copy what you see. Is that a good way of explaining it, do you think?
yeah, definitely. That's definitely what I try to do anyhow.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Okay. Um, so regarding the training for a sacred artist, so we're talking about, this new revival, this new renaissance of sacred art. How would you describe the ideal training for a contemporary sacred artist?
Oh gosh, that's a good question too. Um, well, I mean, you've got to have the skills and the understanding of so you've got the skills based training for one,
Hmm.
but also you've got to have also the philosophical and theological training to back to give a
Yes,
base to what you're going to paint. So if you could have like an art school that was say 4 days a week of skills base, or 3 days a week of skill base, or a day and a half of then just philosophy theology, but
sure.
these things it takes 3 years full time just to get minimum amount of skills to do a realist painting. That's
That's right.
minimum, right? So then you've got to this theology and philosophy on top of that. So some combination of the two, you
Hmm.
know. Um,
Definitely.
but again, I mean, is there really a market for it, right? Like
That's right.
there doesn't seem to be. Like the Catholic Church seems to be shrinking rather than growing in places, but
That's
and
right.
certainly not building big new churches, right? So um, it's a pretty niche market that is. I think the Renaissance really is the bigger kind of renaissance of traditional painting that we're looking at.
That's right. Yeah, sure. And why do you think it is that the Catholic Church is shrinking?
Oh, um,
It's a hard question, I know.
it's a hard question. Sometime between 1965 and 1975, all of the grace was sucked out of the church.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of it has to do with Vatican II and the
Hmm.
misunderstanding that came after that. I think modernism, really just the heresy of all heresies. Um, just changing the culture changes, and at one point the Catholics were much on top of culture and whatnot, and it just never happened. Things changed, right? So I
Sure.
think I think I don't think there's any one specific thing. It's just a number of things, like the church has made some pretty grave mistakes as well, so that turns people off a lot as well, and that's fair enough.
Hmm.
Um, it's very easy to criticize the Catholic Church. I mean, it's very easy, but yeah, I think you need to look really at more at what the teaching is rather than what the mistakes the people are, right? So, and that teaching is pretty consistent over 2,000 years, right?
That's right.
So, you take that, everyone has their own path. So to that, so yeah, I don't know. It's there's attacks on the church from all sorts of different sides too, culturally and um, from inside the church even probably. But yeah, it's a
Sure.
difficult question. I think it just seems like sometime, like I said, between 65 and 75, something just went whoosh, and
Hmm.
the church became a much more less than what it was, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I mean, I know in Australia currently it's over 50% of the population is secular. So it is really, I mean, Catholicism is something that we're kind of, losing, unfortunately. And I'm not too sure, why that's the case, but I think I don't know if it's like the age of reason or something like that, where people know better. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's kind of like that humanist perspective or something like that, where people will come to terms with their own beliefs, and there are a lot of atheists and agnostics out there, and I mean, as you said, everyone has their own path, but it is a shame that we are losing this kind of grand Catholic tradition slowly, slowly.
oh yeah, it is. Yes, we need more saints.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, it's incredible to think back in a time of, Saint Pope John Paul II, who basically beatified Fra Angelico during his time. I mean, he made him blessed. Considering, I mean, he was also a Dominican friar and things like that, but uh, just that idea today of something like that happening is just unheard of.
Yes, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't really have much comment on that, I suppose, but
I guess times have
I think
changed.
we're all called to be saints, right? So I guess we have to look at ourselves if first and see how we can what we can do within ourselves, and from that, hopefully that has effect on people around us and out from there. But
Sure, yeah. That's good advice. So regarding faith, I mean, what role has your faith played in your life?
um, Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised Catholic. I was a Catholic school teacher, but it wasn't really until I got to Italy that I started to really appreciate and understand the fullness of faith. And of course, the um, training that I did with the master's program really opened me up to like the fullness of the theology and the philosophy, and that's really, is really I find very interesting,
Hmm.
right? So, and of course the art, right? So, like Pope Benedict said, the two greatest things about the Catholic Church are the saints and the art.
That's
So,
right. Yeah.
I'm really attracted to the art. So, um, like any Catholic, I have my struggles with it, and sometimes not a very good Catholic, but
Hmm.
um, I guess it's a kind of a lifetime thing, I
Sure.
suppose. Yeah,
Great. Well,
I
thanks for
try
that.
not to. I try not to be too preachy. As sometimes I think in the past I can, but I try just to try to lay out more what the church tries to say about things or the teachings are.
Sure.
Um, Tell people don't copy me because I'm
No,
just
that.
look at the source material.
Sure. Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, look at the catechesis of the Catholic Church. The origin, the foundation, and things like that, and figure out your own path from there, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, give it try to at least give it an understanding and
Yeah.
see how it works. At least you can have an understanding, and then you can respond to it. Our culture is so not Catholic. It's very easy just naturally, I guess, stray. I don't know.
Hmm.
Just everyday things that you do.
Sure.
Like it's very very difficult. Families and relationships are very difficult these days, and
That's right.
you don't have a culture that supports marriage very easily, and
Yeah.
so it's not like we're living in a Catholic Christian culture anymore. So it can be just day to day can be without even thinking about it. Difficult, I guess, to be fully Catholic. So
Yes. Yeah.
um, you know,
I
I guess just
understand. Yeah.
try and keep in your mind, that that these things, do have a truth to them, and try and work towards that truth, I suppose, right?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, and I guess it's just that thing that, like, as you're saying, we're living in modern times. I mean, times have changed. There are so many different philosophies out there and things like that. That But I think having a faith in God and things like that is very grounding. I mean, knowing that there is a higher truth than to what we know as our own existence is a very healthy thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it colors the rest of your worldview, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there might be individual struggles that we have, but I think understanding that, I mean, it makes sense that there's something that's, you know, something that's bigger and beyond that has the origin of everything, right? So
That's right.
I guess that having some faith in that, and then trying, day to day, trying to form yourself to those things that you need to be formed to, I suppose.
Sure, sure. That's good advice, Martino. Thank you. So moving on to my final couple of questions. The next question I wanted to ask was regarding books. So, what
Hmm.
books have helped you with your technical and aesthetic formation over the years?
Oh, okay. Well, the first one would have to be How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Yes, that's a classic.
Way back in the late 70s, early 80s, I suppose.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was the first. I guess that was probably the real first art book I had.
sure.
Yeah. Um, and then the Loomis books are very good.
Yeah.
I think
And they've
very good.
they came back into print a couple of years ago. You can actually
Yes.
purchase them now, the actual hard copies, not just the ones you find online.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good one. Uh, Drawing Lessons of the Great Masters by
Yeah.
Robert Beverly Hale is pretty good to look at, just to understand more the construct
Hmm.
of drawing, is I think a very good one. And then I mean I just like looking at pictures of paintings, right? So
Sure.
um, just looking at just looking here a book by Frangelico, or the Bouguereau book, or
Mm,
um, whenever I see a new artist or an artist I like, I'll try and buy a book. So really just
hmm.
looking at the pictures more than more than anything, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to look at the pictures. It's hard to read the writing sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Um,
And
yeah.
go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say regarding, I mean, these are more technical books regarding books more in developing your intellect or aesthetic sensibility. I mean, I understand theology of the body. What really helped you, I think when I was writing your thesis, right, you referred to that quite a bit.
Yes, that was a good one. Uh, there's in the back of my thesis, there's a bibliography of some good books. I just one of the books that I really liked slipped my mind. It's a history of the image
Mm,
by Robert Besconsan, I think is the name. It was a
okay.
really interesting, very dense
Yes.
book.
Yeah.
Um, I'd have to look up the exact title in the bibliography.
Sure.
Um, then there's like the practice and science of drawing by
Mm-hmm.
Harold Speed. It's very good.
Yes. Yep.
That wasn't a one to read, as well as oil painting techniques and materials, also by Speed. Those are kind of the two kind of base ones, I would say, that
Yes.
would be good
I
to work
agree.
in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm just looking at my bookshelf here and seeing
Oh, sure.
more ideas. James Gurney's books are very good as well,
Yeah, they've got great
especially for,
reviews.
yeah, very good ones to have. Yeah, I guess those to start with, anyways. Those are
Those are
very
good
good ones to
start.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, regarding theology of the body, I mean, this is going to be a challenging question, but can you give a brief summation as to what exactly that thesis is about?
Well, it was a series of talks that Pope John Paul
Yeah.
II had given. It was his response to the sexual revolution. So he was trying to show what the meaning of the body is, right? So
Sure.
what the meaning of it is, what the meaning is to be a man, what's the meaning of being a woman, how these two go together, how they complement each other. And so it was basically him trying to address some of the issues that have come up uh, in sexual revolution. I mean, his entire ministry as a priest and bishop was very much about counseling
Hmm.
couples. So he didn't have like specific intimate knowledge, I suppose, but he had a grand experience of many of thousands of people that he interacted with, and then combining that with the teachings of Christ and the Church,
Hmm.
he came up with this theology of the body, which has also been a really good resource for artists. We'll see what long term it's like, but
Mm.
it was a pretty exciting thing that when it first came out, and really helped me to understand a little bit more to bring me, I guess, a bit back into Catholic faith as well. So that's another good resource too for people, especially the lectures by uh, Christopher.
That's right. Yes,
I forget his last name.
they're online. I think they may be
Yeah,
online, or there may be videotapes of them. Not
you
quite
can
sure.
find.
You can
I think
find
there's
them.
some.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can find them online. I think as MP3s.
yeah, that's right.
I forget his last name.
It doesn't come to mind. Yeah.
It's come to me in a second, but yeah. Um, so I just my friend Donny McManus is kind of an expert on that from the artistic
Yeah,
point of view. So he taught a course on the theology of the body and art,
that's
and then
right.
he's very good at that. So I would recommend his lectures are online to go and take
Sure,
a look at that if you're interested
that's
in
right.
that.
Does a very good job of articulating himself.
Yes, yeah, he's very good.
Yeah. Did you? So I understand you read the Pope John Paul II's Letters to Artists as well. That helped you.
Yeah. I mean, I did read it. It was more of inspiration than anything, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And what he
Um,
proposes is just so profound. I mean, to inspire artists to return to creating art for the church, basically, is what I took from it anyway.
yeah, again, that comes back to the same thing, though, is that we need people then to commission this art, right? Like we need these church it's again education as well, right? It's not just felt banners anymore, right? Like
Hmm.
thing is, art is always the thing that's considered last, right? Like they got to have money for the heating and the plumbing and all that stuff, but if there's anything left over, then we'll put some art in. So it's unfortunate, but which is one thing I like about the Orthodox tradition is that they've actually art is a centerpiece. It's like it's integrated into their building, right? So it's like not a
Sure.
question of it having art. It's like it's part of the building. So unfortunately, we've lost that. We've lost that in the West, right? I mean, we've become more Protestantized,
That's right.
um, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back as well. Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's just about satisfying those general needs, and I think art now has become more like a luxury instead of a necessity, I suppose.
Well, yeah, we're living. Yeah, of course, it's a total luxury, right? So we live in this kind of society where everything's got to be equal, and that just means like lowest common denominator, really. Right?
Yeah,
So cookie cutter homes, cookie cutter malls. You know, the pursuit of beauty really isn't that important. It's more pursuit of utilitarianism,
that's right. Exactly.
utility, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's most important because that's
yeah,
just culture we live in.
sure. But I mean, if beauty is considered so irrelevant, I mean, it seems like a bit of a contradiction because the first thing we do when we get up in the morning is look in a mirror, right?
True.
Yeah. So, and just going back to the text for a second, did you read Gaudium et Spes, from the Vatican II?
I did when I did my thesis. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's part of the reading I did, but that was a while back. Yeah.
sure. Well, how did you find it?
From what I remember, the points of it, I thought again, it was very, very good, very clear, right? So,
Mm,
um, for me personally, I just found that the spirit of liturgy kind of did all that, kind of explained things in a much simpler and direct
that's
way.
right. Yeah,
So, I mean, the letter's kind of long,
it is. It is a long one. Yeah,
and and I mean, so is the book. But I just found the book was it just sucked you into it. It just was so beautifully written and made so much sense, right? So it kind of like maybe put into a bit more clarity some of what was said in the letter.
sure. Yeah. Okay. So, is there any other text you wanted to add there before we move on?
Um, Not off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. No.
Sure. Okay, that's okay. Um, okay, so this is getting towards my final question. Where do you see traditional representational art heading in the future? And this is not just Catholic sacred art, but also the secular realist art that's occurring.
Um, I think we're probably going to see a little bit more of, I think, the influence of, say, less of that kind of, as you were saying, that less kind of photographic or highly detailed work. I'm hoping to see things go a little bit more towards the kind of interpretive or constructive method in the sense of
Mm,
it's not necessarily photographic, but still
sure.
looks real, right? So a little bit more like say 18th century painting, right?
Mm,
So there's such a heavy reliance on photographs right now. So
hmm.
um, yeah, I think that's probably what we'll be seeing as we get these younger students, training,
Mm,
and so we lost a lot of talent, I think, in the 20th century. So
yeah,
hopefully we can get back a lot of that talent and get some more great painters.
sure, sure. Um, okay, so I've pretty much reached the end of my list of questions. Is there anything else you would like to add or go back to or highlight before we conclude?
Nothing stands out. I thought it was pretty thorough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so regarding what you're up to today, so are you in the studio most days? Are you teaching? So what are you up to currently?
I'm working on a portrait commission,
Mm-hmm.
and I just finished a series of classes. I didn't have classes on right now. I'm heading to Vancouver in a few weeks to teach another workshop
Sure.
at the Northwest Fine Arts Studio, which
Okay.
is in Richmond. It's a painting. It's called the it's a painting methods course. So basically, the perfect painting method. So we just teach the
Mm.
steps
Who's the director
painting,
of
and
that course? Sorry, Martinho?
Wendy Chung.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
So that's online. You can find that online as well. And I'm sure it's on my website. My website's getting redone. So
Mm,
yeah, and then doing Adrian Gottlieb's workshop
yeah,
in the end of February, which I'm looking forward to, and then back to Canada in March for another series of classes. One will be painting portraits from life and a head drawing class, and
sure.
then back to Europe in the summer for Angel Academy. I'm teaching for the first time in Rome
Great.
um, at a course um, with an artist who has a school there.
Hmm.
Um, so let me pull up the information so that I can be specific with
Sure, that'd
dates
be
and stuff.
great.
So his name is Rodolfo Papa,
Okay.
and he has a school in Rome called the Accademia Urbana dell'Arte. He wrote, Professor Papa is a prolific painter and writer.
Hmm.
Um, kind of a historian, theologian. So
Okay.
we're gonna be doing this class together.
Great.
It's the second week of August where we'll be visiting pieces in situ in the church, and he'll be talking about them theologically, philosophically, what's happening with them. And then in the studio, we'll be doing either a copy of the painting or one by the same artist.
Fantastic.
So we can actually see, go between studio and church or museum. It's a very unique
Yeah,
course. It's the first time anyone's done something like this. So I hope we get enough students to make it happen. It's just, again, a matter of getting the word out.
sure.
But nothing beats Rome, right? So
Yeah,
it
of
should
course.
be a lot of fun. He's got a great little studio, and he's another great artistic personality, and he's heavily involved with the Vatican, and um, is very prolific. Actually, I asked him how is he so prolific. I sent him a message because he's writing, he's always painting, he's got tons of books and
Sure.
articles, and he just writes me back, "Essere Romano." I'm Roman. So yeah, hopefully
Fantastic.
that happens, and then in the fall I've got my studio in Portugal artist in residency program. So I've got a couple artists just coming to study with me, where they work on some projects and I guide them through them at the same time. So that's always nice. It's a very nice place where I am in Portugal, northern Portugal. So
Lovely. Sure. And just regarding the realist movement in Alberta and Canada at the moment, is that sort of taken off there as well, or you're pretty isolated down there?
well, Calgary's pretty isolated. It's kind of a big city in the middle of nowhere, but there's a really strong arts community here, and a lot of really good figurative artists in the community.
Sure.
Um, so we all kind of know each other too, which is kind of nice. So we uh, just recently they had a show where they had it was called Neon, so they had to have some neon in their work, and a lot of it was figurative.
Hmm.
There's a friend of mine, local artist and promoter, I guess he'd be now. He's named Aaron Sidorenko.
Hmm.
Does a yearly show called the People's Portrait Award, which is open to anyone who wants to enter. So it's like this. It's like goes from like simple amateur to professional. So this huge range of work held in this building called the Sea Space, which is a turn of the 19th to 20th century sandstone school building. It turned into an art space.
Wow. Okay.
So that's very cool. And then there's also a figurative show also run by Aaron every summer at a local gallery.
Fantastic.
So there's lots going on here in the city. I know there's some stuff in Toronto, but Canada itself, it's hard to sell paintings. People have these huge houses with a lot of blank walls. They just don't buy art. Especially Calgary is one of the richest cities in the country. Being oil with all the oil and everything, you just don't see. It's just not. It's again education. It's the culture, right? It's just a place. It's a bit depressing, so,
Sure.
but the people that are here and do it are passionate about it and
Great.
and love art. So try to keep in contact with them.
Do you have many schools that offer traditional representational art training in Calgary?
There's some studios, some individual artist studios
Sure.
that offer classes, and I think there's also the Alberta College of Art, which is a modern art school, but they have some instructors that have been trained traditionally that
Fantastic.
do some
Good.
courses, but there's not really a program like the Angel Academy program. My
Yeah.
idea was to maybe get something going like that here, but I just seem to
Great.
be pulled more to being in Europe, and I'll be down under actually in the end of the year too. So hopefully we can
Yeah.
meet.
That because you've come to Tasmania, you taught a workshop in Tasmania, right?
Yeah, I've been twice, and hopefully we're going to do one again this year. And then I always come up to Melbourne
Oh,
to.
fantastic.
I've got friends there, and a student of mine this last summer has got a home in there. She said, "When you go to Melbourne, let me know. You can stay in our place." So
Oh, great.
I'll
Yeah, so
be look
yeah, definitely
great.
let me know. It'd be amazing to meet in person.
Yeah, yeah. I can maybe come to your school and give a little talk or something if you like.
Oh yeah, so when's that happening?
If it happens, we're just still figuring it out. Would be probably like in December. I would come up.
December. Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Maybe
I'll
January. I don't know. I haven't. Nothing's been figured. Nothing's been stated yet. It was just like kind of proposed, and then we'll see what happens. So
great. Well, we
I'm
definitely
keep my fingers crossed.
sure. I mean, well, we definitely need more realists down here, so you're welcome to come
do you,
here
do
and
you know Do you know Andrea Smith? She's from Melbourne.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah. She
she's a
actually
good friend of mine.
yeah, she comes down every January to give. She has Atelier Canova in Rome, but she comes
Yeah,
down every January to Melbourne. I don't know if she's coming this year. I didn't get any email from her, but yeah, she teaches like a 2 week workshop here locally. I attended one of her 1 day workshops. Yeah, but incredible. She comes from the Florence Academy lineage. Really,
yeah.
really, really great work. Yeah, quality work.
She was she was one of the first people I met in Florence, and we've been friends ever since. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
she doesn't have the studio. The Atelier Canova, she closed it. She's just now painting
Is
full
that
time, and
right?
yeah,
Oh,
she's got a little studio. So
I was
yeah,
unaware of that.
yeah.
Did someone else take over the school, or was it just completely closed down?
I don't know actually. I think she just decided she wanted to paint more and teach less. So
Yeah, sure, sure. Fair enough. Okay, well, Martino, is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude?
no, nothing to add. Just thanks very much for your interest and taking the time to talk with me. It's a real honor. So
No,
hopefully something interesting came out of it.
of course, yes. I've been wanting to speak with you a lot for a long time regarding your technique and your philosophy. I think it's really incredible. I mean, there aren't really a lot of Catholic realists out there that I find. I mean, I see a bit of like paintings of Christ and things like that, but to actually connect and to talk to someone that can really articulate themselves well is it's a real privilege. So thank you, and thank you for sending me your thesis as well. It's just incredible. Thank you for doing what you do. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so what I'll do, Marcinho, is I'll send you a copy of the audio file for yourself, and you can do with it what you wish. Is there an email or a website that you would like to announce on this interview?
Oh, well, the Angel Academy website's always good for our workshops,
Sure, yeah.
and then my website, which is martinoart.com.
Great, fantastic.
I've got a new one coming up. It should be up hopefully in the next month or so. I just have to finish some writing for it. So
Fantastic, great. And you've also got your blog.
my blog has been a bit defunct, but I have to get back on that too. So yeah, it goes through stages,
Sure,
which is off the coast of Utopia.
great, fantastic. Okay, so thanks very much, Martino. What I'll do is I'll send you this audio file at some point today. Or I guess
Okay.
in your end it's nighttime, is it? Or it's about 6 o'clock?
It's 6 o'clock. Yeah.
6 o'clock, yeah. So hopefully
Yeah.
I'll get that to you before before too late. But thank you very much for taking the time, Martino, to talking to me
Oh,
today.
pleasure.
I really
Pleasure.
appreciate it, sharing your ideas and thinking about learning about your thought processes and your techniques. And I really hope to keep this conversation open, and speak with other Catholic artists and non-Catholic artists, secular realists, to kind of raise awareness and to connect with a community of other representational artists to really be
Well,
involved in this new renaissance, as you
that would be great.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Well, think about Donny McManus and John
Mm,
Angel, and
definitely.
even my friend Lucio, the Italian artist I was telling you about, would be interesting because he comes from a different tradition, but he's also a Christian. So
Yeah,
Um,
sure. What I'll do is I'll get you to spell his surname for me. Lucio,
Lucio is Lucio. Perillo is Parillo.
L-L-O. Fantastic. Thank you, Martinho. I'll definitely consider all those artists that you just mentioned, and there'll be more interviews in the future. So definitely keep an eye out on skillbasedart.weebly.com as well. So thank you again, Martino. Really appreciate your time today, and I hope to keep our dialogue open.
Yes, definitely. Thanks a lot.
No worries. Okay, thank you, Martino, and I'll speak with you again soon, hopefully.
Have a good night.
You
Ciao.
too. Bye bye.